Welcome to our February 22nd edition of Saturday Simulcast. I'm Alan Karpik of goldenblack.com. Today, a special show. They all are, but Brian Neubert will talk some Purdue basketball on the front end. Tom Dienhart will break us down in the latest on Purdue football and roster reorganization, all that's going on with Coach Barry Odom and company. And, of course, Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, Big Ten Network, Fox bracketologist, will give kind of the big picture view of where Purdue basketball is right now heading into tomorrow's big game at Indiana. Want to thank our sponsor, the Purdue Union Club Hotel, and really some fun news, and many of you know this if you've been around West Lafayette or been to Mackey Arena, you know that the Sam Allen clubhouse is being built on Cherry Lane. Well, in that clubhouse, there's going to be the Boilermakers Prime, which is going to be run by the Purdue Union Club Hotel, and it'll be opening this spring. Nestled in the Burke Boilermaker Golf Complex, experience the dining room's refined, club-inspired ambiance with a 2-story wine wall and grand 30-seat bar. Then savor an exclusive raw bar and signature cuts of beef. You can visit certainly the boilerhouseprime.com and get more information about when that restaurant is going to be opening. It's big happenings in West Lafayette. So without further ado, hope you enjoy our show, and we'll look forward to our guest here, some exciting basketball and football talk. I'm here with Brian Neubert, and Brian, I don't think the sky is falling, but Purdue has certainly fallen on some hard times, at least losing 3 games, something that they haven't done since the COVID year. And then you go into Indiana on Sunday, which is never an easy task, or rarely is an easy task. I guess the first half of last year, Purdue made it look easy. But just what are you thinking as Purdue heads into this? You know, they've lost 3 games, but 2 of those 3 games they were underdogs. But you obviously need to try to get it back together. And what do you think you'll see out of Indiana on Sunday?
Yeah, I think that, with the level of success Purdue's had the last X number of years, I think the overreaction quotient is pretty considerable around Purdue right now, which is kind of a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
At the same time, the standard is very high at Purdue. This was a team that, was the preseason Big Ten favorite, playing for a 3rd straight Big Ten championship, and that opportunity is slipping away very quickly. Purdue would need a lot of help, a lot of things to go right, on top of them doing a complete 180 right now from what's gone on the last 3 games. 3 games against 3 very good teams that are in the Big Ten race along with them for a reason. But 3 straight losses nonetheless, all kind of different from one another. The Michigan game was just strange. It was the foul disparity. I'm not saying it was the officials. I'm saying it was the foul disparity. It was Trey Coffin and Caleb First fouling out at the end when you have no other big guys. It was your relative lack of size showing up for one of the few times this season in a really impactful way. The Wisconsin game was Wisconsin being awesome, plus Purdue really slipping on defense. And when I say slipping on defense, that means Purdue slipping, but it also means the opponents figuring Purdue out. That is part of this. Purdue made very meaningful changes to their defensive system, their defensive structure this season out of necessity, because they have no rim protector. They have very little size, and they essentially just changed what they do defensively. And that was a smashing success for, the first half to 2/3 of the Big Ten season. The problem is you put half to 2/3 of a Big Ten season on tape, and Big Ten coaches, make a lot of money for a reason. And they figured some things out that the people Purdue played earlier in January and, in early February couldn't or didn't. And it's kind of shown up. Wisconsin really sort of laid a blueprint there on how to score against Purdue. Wisconsin is uniquely engineered to do that. But then when you look at what happened against Michigan State, too, it was turnovers. It wasn't a horrible number of turnovers with 12, but it was the fact Michigan State scored off every one of them, I think. That was the real problem. But Purdue couldn't stop a simple ball screen down the stretch of that game. And that, again, goes back to Purdue kind of slipping a little bit defensively. And, I figured the Wisconsin game was an opportunity for Purdue to kind of let it sink in what got them here. And that was their defensive improvement. And, they had their moments in the first half where they looked pretty good. And then in the second half, I think opponents the last 2 games are shooting 70% after halftime, which is not going to win you a lot of basketball games, obviously. So Purdue's got to get back to, they're not going to be the same team defensively that they were in January because people know what they're doing now.
Right.
But they have to get back to being, a better than average defensive team while continuing to be very good offensively, which they kind of have been. That gets lost in this is they're shooting a really high percentage. Trey Kaufman-Ren's on an absolute tear. Braden Smith is Braden Smith, and they're playing pretty well offensively. They just got to play both ends of the floor like they were a month ago.
You said something interesting, which is true. You look at the Wisconsin game and the Michigan State game, maybe Michigan State a little bit later into the first half, but Purdue did get off to good starts and had sizable, not huge leads, but nearly double-digit leads in both those games. Michigan State might have been only 7. But my point is that it's not like they've got smashed in the mouth to start these games, and yet, and Michigan, they led 37-28 until the Wolverines scored the last 7 points of the half or whatever that was to bring it within 2.
Yeah.
And my numbers may not be right there, but what factor is that? Again, it's not like they're getting off to a bad start. They're just, and yet in the second half, defensively, they just haven't been able to get the job done.
Well, the Michigan State games related to Trey Kaufman-Renn picking up fouls.
No question.
And it's a pretty common occurrence and again, it's not outlandish to point out that, hey, when the Big Ten's leading scorer comes out of the game, things change, but things are changing pretty profoundly. Whether it's connected or not, I can't say. Matt Painter seems to have taken a little bit of, I don't want to say exception, but he seems to bristle at the suggestion that they can't get good shots without Trey Kaufman-Renn on the floor, which I haven't exactly said. I've just kind of pointed out that, a lot of these runs have aligned with Trey Kaufman-Renn going out, but that's been part of it. Purdue's inability to A, get to the foul line, and B, keep the opponent off the foul line. When you look at these foul disparities in these games, it's low-hanging fruit to say the officials aren't helping Purdue, but Purdue has to earn help too. They got to keep the ball in front of them, and they have to do what you need to do to get on the right side of that foul count. And as of right now, they're getting a lot of little ticky-tack fouls. I think they're getting penalized, for having to overachieve as a rebounding team because they don't have that one physical presence that was the one drawing the fouls instead of being called for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's just been a lot of reach-ins. There's been a lot of very, very close, to say the least, reach-ins or whatever it might be that have really come back to haunt Purdue. They add up, man. The moving screens, the reach-ins on the rebounds, those things get opponents to bonuses. And then when you're in the bonus and you struggle to stop the dribble, you're cooked. Purdue couldn't defend down the stretch of that Michigan game, even if it wanted to. Purdue couldn't defend down the stretch of that Wisconsin game, even if it had anything positive going for it defensively, because you couldn't be physical. And you're seeing Purdue having to concede layups at times at the basket that they might not ordinarily concede because these foul counts are just burying them. And, how that turns around, I don't know, but keeping the basketball in front of you against the dribble would be a good start.
Well, Caleb, first, too, it's been first and Trey Kaufman-Renn, and Purdue's only measurable, Raleigh Burgess to some extent. But, having first foul trouble is also a problem, not as big a problem as Kaufman-Renn's, but it's been a problem here and really limits Purdue around the basket in that situation.
Yeah. No, you are starting to see, I think, and this could go a lot of different ways, but you're starting to feel Daniel Jacobson's loss.
Yeah.
Now, when I say that, I have to qualify that by saying you don't know what Daniel Jacobson would have been right now.
No question.
At this stage of the season. Either he would have been coming into his own with experience, or he would have been so worn down physically from people beating him up all Big Ten season and from the natural rigors of a freshman year that maybe he would be really struggling. But having a 7'4" guy at the rim would clean up a lot of Purdue's issues. he would accidentally get 4 or 5 rebounds a game that he could reach that nobody else can reach.
Right.
He would draw 3 or 4 fouls a game from people who just couldn't reach as high as he can reach, having to undercut him and just push him and things like that. And it would make a big difference if he was in a position at this stage of his freshman year where he could be a valuable contributor. And that first game and 1 minute that he played for Purdue, whatever it was, he looked like a guy who could help you. I mean, he blocked 3 shots in the first game. And, with those 3 blocked shots, he's going to finish top 10 on the roster this year. If not like top 8, I'll have to go back and look. Purdue has no shot blockers. Nothing. And I think that Daniel Jacobson, had that first game in a minute, been something that would have reflected reality later in the season, is a guy who would have gotten you 3 or 4 rebounds a game, would have gotten you 2 putbacks a game probably would have drawn 2 or 3 fouls a game, and all of those things would be really, really valuable right now. On top of the fact that when Trakoff, Moran, and Caleb Furst are both in foul trouble at the end of the Michigan game, you have somebody else to turn to. Riley Burgess is going to be a good player at Purdue most likely, but he is not ready for those situations, nor do I think anyone expected him to be. Remember, this guy came razor close to redshirting. Purdue didn't play him because it planned on playing him in the final minute of a close game with a Big Ten championship on the line. It didn't redshirt him to get him minutes over the first 39 minutes of a bunch of these games, not the final minute. So Purdue's lack of depth, lack of size, those have always been knowns. Those have been always things that, you knew were issues for Purdue that they were going to have to overcome. And now they're probably showing their dirty little faces more than ever this season.
Yeah,
did I just say dirty little faces?
I think you did. Did. But
what does that even mean?
I don't know. You can go back and rewind the tape and tell us what it means. No, it's
Why are their faces dirty?
Because they're getting dirty because they're not having the success that Purdue wanted to have at this point of the season. It's interesting too. Jacobson, even against Creighton in the exhibition game, scores 11 points. It's a 3-pointer. I think it was fair to maybe to assume that he was going to be a factor, but nothing to worry. Nothing that can be done about that now. Fletcher Lawyer is also interesting because Purdue's inability to get out in, against Wisconsin, they only caused 3 turnovers, and against Michigan State, he only gets 5 shots, but not getting shots in transition, threes in transition, which has been a big thing for Lawyer. I know some people think, well, he's just hiding out there. He's not hiding out there. He's not hiding. He's not hiding. He's not getting shots. But talk about that and the need. Yes, to get him off to 15 points a game, that'd be good, but it's situational. He's got to be able to get to, Purdue's got to cause some things on the defensive end sometimes to get him the shots he needs.
Well, I'll start with the Lawyer part of it.
Yeah.
One, offense is not Purdue's problem right now.
Yeah.
Defense is their problem. Rebounding is their problem. Fouling is their problem. Purdue scored 84 points at home against Wisconsin. They shot 40+% from 3. They shot 50+% from the floor. That is good enough to win 99 times out of 100 on your home
floor.
Well, it has. Probably never happened before.
Yeah.
They turned the ball over 3 times against Wisconsin, scored 84 points. Again, shot really well from 3, shot really well from the floor, and lost. That is not an offensive problem. Michigan State, or I'll go back to Michigan. They score 77 points, I think, on the road, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's good enough to win.
Yeah.
You only score 66 at Michigan State. But that was going to be a low-scoring game, most likely. And 66 can win you that game. Purdue shot well. They were pretty efficient. The issue was the turnovers. It was the 12 turnovers. 12 is the number you can live with more often than not. But when the opponent scores on every single one of them, that's the problem. But the defensive part of it was the bigger issue against Michigan State. My point is that this guy not scoring enough or that guy not scoring enough, that is not what is lost 3 games in a row for Purdue. What is lost 3 games in a row is the opponent scoring at will.
Yeah.
And the thing about Fletcher Lawyer is, he's very good at playing off other people. I think he's been very comfortable doing that over the years. He could take 6 threes a game if he wants, but he won't shoot 45% over 6 attempts a game. That's just volume and efficiency never go hand in hand. Never. They don't conflate a shooting percentage with increased volume as if they will ebb and flow proportionally. He could do that. It would be fun to see what would happen if he did it, but at the same time, Trey Kaufman-Renn is going to lead the Big Ten in scoring. That's a pretty good place to go with the ball. Braden Smith's going to have the ball a lot, and they want him looking to score. Having Fletcher Lawyer to run a couple of plays for a game, a couple of inbound plays a game, and to play off Kaufman-Renn and Smith that's a pretty good weapon. I don't think you necessarily want him jacking up threes at the expense of those other guys getting their touches. I understand. Fletcher Lawyer is a really good player. I think people still haven't grasped that yet. Offensively, he is a really, really high-level player. The numbers aren't always going to illustrate that because he's not the highest usage player in the world. If you want him to be the highest usage player on the team, that would be a choice. But you've got a couple other really good destinations on offense that are panning out for you right now. So needing someone else to shoot more, would not only yield unknown results, but it might hurt you because of what Trey Kaufman-Renn is doing right now. What was the other part of your question?
That was just the main one with respect to Lawyer and offensive efficiency and Purdue's inability
he is also
to get runouts because of not causing enough turnovers.
I'll get there real quick. People also don't. I don't know if people necessarily notice what Fletcher Lawyer's gravity on offense means to the other guys. All the motions they run him off, all the sacrificial stuff. What that means to Trey Kaufman-Renn's productivity and what that means for Braden Smith's productivity and things like that. The respect he commands opens things up for other people. And that's always been an important part of the role of that quote-unquote shooter, whether it was Sasha Stefanovic, Dakota Mathias, Ryan Klein, Carson Edwards, whoever it might be. He's been a good passer. He is making a concerted effort to attack closeouts off the dribble. He's drawn a lot of fouls that way. He's made runners all season that way. It's just not necessarily happening every game, and it's not happening so often you're getting to that 12, 13, 14, 15 points a game level, but he is being productive. And I don't think I don't think taking one game and protracting that over his whole season is necessarily the thing to do. I think he only had 8 points at Michigan State. One of them was on a three-pointer at the buzzer, so he essentially had 5 points when the game wasn't decided. You'd like more, yeah, but as I said before, offense isn't really Purdue's problem. The thing about the turnovers is, people were so blindsided by what Purdue was doing defensively in January, which really wasn't all that revolutionary. I mean, it's stuff other teams do, just maybe not as much in the Big Ten other than Nebraska. They were so sucker punched by that. And, Purdue, I think, played some of the lower IQ offensive teams in the league. They turned the ball over a ton, and that was a huge boon to Purdue's offense. That's part of the reason why Purdue's offensive efficiency has been off the charts this season. But it also just took so many possessions away from opponents that Purdue was winning that mathematics game there. Once people started getting their legs under them in terms of what Purdue was doing defensively, they became more offensive toward it as opposed to defensive toward it, and they stopped turning the ball over. And that's been, probably the biggest difference in these last couple of games is that, people haven't turned the ball over quite as much. And that's maybe not a failing on Purdue's part as much as it is a adjustment on offense's part, because it wasn't, even with what Purdue was doing, it wasn't the highest pressure defense, in college basketball. The guards were getting good pressure on the basketball. I think that's really important, and that's something that's fallen off here lately. But other than that, I think the turnovers were largely about, opponents just kind of not being ready for what was coming at them. And if Purdue can get back to that, great, but I think everything they're going to do is there are no secrets anymore. So, Purdue's just going to have to be that much better at what they're doing, I guess.
Braden Smith at, playing 40 minutes or 39 minutes and 30 seconds against Michigan State, but is playing that. Nobody's probably built better to play that amount of time, his energy level and all of that, but how big a factor, and not necessarily the 40 minutes, but just the load he has to carry, especially when Trey Kaufman-Renn is in foul trouble. I mean, how do you see that weighing with him, and is it a factor for what his productivity has been and will be for the rest of the season, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if he's, tired per se. I think he's got a lot on his plate. I think mentally there's a lot of the demands on him that, can wear people down. The schedule these teams play these days.
Yeah.
I think the one time that he looked like he wasn't himself was the Ohio State game. And that, to me, people are tired of hearing me say this, but it's true, so I'm going to keep saying it. That was the fourth of 5 straight 3-day turnarounds for Purdue, and that span covered both coasts. That should never happen again to anyone. And this league is so stretched out, and TV has so much say in when and where these games are played that stuff happens to teams. And it got Purdue against Ohio State because its best player, its most important player, was not himself. And that's the reason Purdue lost that game, above all others, if not the only reason Purdue lost that game. But no, he's a pretty special athlete. He's very well conditioned. I don't know if he necessarily wears down because of minutes. I think it's important for these guys to get days off, and they finally got a day off after the first Michigan game, and that they just got 2 days off here after Michigan State, and the games are kind of spread out now, so people should be able to get their legs back under them, get their heads straight, and whatnot. And but no, I just think he wants that responsibility. I think Matt Painter trying to take him out of the game would be one of those situations where you're kind of sticking your hand in the Barracuda tank.
Yeah.
I don't know if you necessarily want to.
He wasn't happy when he went out against Michigan State.
He came out against Michigan State because he was upset with the officials, and he was talking about that 3-pointer he shot that I think he thought he got fouled on. I didn't get a good enough look at it to comment, but
just on TV it looked that way a little bit. But
I do see Purdue getting flustered sometimes. You do see the frustration. And I think there have been times this season where the officials have got between their ears. This is a weird season for Purdue. It seems like a lot of stuff is coming back on them from an officiating perspective, which is not to say that things were tilted in their favor before. They just so happened to have the guy that no one could officiate properly, and fans didn't understand. But some of the stuff that is going on with like the moving screens that happen when the fouls are uneven, you can call that 25 times a game if you want, but when fouls are 5-1, it's getting called all the time to even things up. And the thing that happened to Camden Heide on his moving screen yesterday came right after Michigan State literally knocked Miles Colvin out of the game, and on a clear moving screen. And that's part of college basketball. I mean, the officials are humans. They're not robots. And you can't see everything all the time, and you sure as hell can't call everything that happens. But it does seem like Purdue's had some really, really tough luck this season. Some of the fouls against Michigan that took Kaufman-Renn and Caleb First out of the game at the end and arguably cost Purdue that game. Probably not arguably cost Purdue that game, were pretty light. And, the second foul on Kaufman-Renn at Michigan State I'm still not sure what happened. I don't think he knows what happened. He thought it was on Caleb First. I thought it was on Caleb First.
I did too, yeah.
But I also didn't see a foul, so I don't know. But when he picks up that second foul and comes out, connected or not, as I said before, I don't know. I can't say with certainty that changes things for Purdue, other than the fact that the Big Ten's leading scorer leaving the game is going to affect anyone.
Any team, right.
But opposing runs opponents' runs have dovetailed very closely on a number of occasions with Trey Kaufman going out with fouls. And when that happens, Braden Smith has to do more. You saw against Iowa, he just went Russell Westbrook and just started making jump shots left and right and carried Purdue through that. At Michigan State, he seemed to be trying to do too much against a defense that was geared up 100% on him in those moments. Dribbled too much, probably got a little too deep, turned the ball over a few times, and bad things happened. And it's just, there is no positive side to your destination player on offense, the Big Ten's leading scorer, leaving the game. It's a matter of whether or not that is throwing Purdue off, whether it's destabilizing Purdue. That said, I thought Painter did a really good job at Michigan State managing that offense, defensing Trey Kaufman and Will Berg, who deserves credit. He played well. I mean, he hasn't, to my only semi-trained eye, he seemed to do his job when he was out there in a really weird spot because he hadn't played in weeks. Hadn't played a meaningful minute in months, probably. But no, I think at the end of the day at Michigan State, you got your 33 minutes from Trey Kaufman. You got your 24 points. You got what you need from him. But him having to come out at that moment after that weird foul, after which he buried his head in his jersey, he was so frustrated. That couldn't help because Purdue was up 7 like a few seconds before. And a few seconds later, Michigan State goes on an 8-0 run. So coincidence or not, I don't know, but Purdue needs Trey Kaufman out there.
Yeah, no question. All right, Sunday, Bloomington, never an easy game for Purdue, like I said earlier, but, and you'd written and talked about how really the Indiana game on January 31st, I believe it was maybe the start of some of Purdue's defensive challenges. Just the way Indiana was able to get to the basket. Trey Galloway had a number of layups in that game, and Indiana's dangerous, obviously. I mean, I doubt the line isn't out yet, but I can't imagine Purdue might be a slight favorite in this one, but it's not going to be by a lot. But what do you expect? And in the emotional environment down there with Indiana, with a coach that's a lame duck, what do you expect to see on Sunday?
Well, Indiana is not going to tank. They, when things were going sideways for them mid-Big Ten season, it was clear Mike Woodson was out, and they were going into the hardest part of their schedule. You sort of wondered if they weren't just going to kind of pack their bags and just cash their paychecks and, be done with it and, just kind of lose out. But them finding a way to win at Michigan State, I think that was probably more about Michigan State and its second game back after its West Coast trip. A trend in the Big Ten, by the way, losing your second game after you come back from the West Coast. But they found a way to win at Michigan State. They were cooked against UCLA.
Right.
They came back and had a chance at the end, and they've just played. They've shown some pride, and I think the players deserve credit for that under some pretty difficult circumstances. They obviously, I failed to mention, they damn near beat Purdue in Mackey Arena, which, no one expected to even be a possibility. I don't think anyone Purdue associated even fathomed the possibility that Indiana was going to come into Purdue and win that game. They damn near did. And
they led with 2 minutes to go, right?
Purdue had to pull that out at the end, and to Purdue's credit, it did. But as you mentioned, that was kind of the first sign of trouble for Purdue when they couldn't stop Trey Galloway and Umar Ballo in those side ball screens.
Right.
And, Purdue really struggled with Umar Ballo's size. That was one of those moments when Purdue's deficiencies that they've been doing such a good job overcoming in January really came back to bear. Those dirty little faces I mentioned before, rearing themselves. Again, I don't know why the faces are dirty, but they have been rearing themselves. So, Purdue's got to be better defensively than it's been. They've got to be really good on the glass. They've got to keep Ballo off the glass. They've got to keep Ballo out of those lob dunks, which Michigan State, by the way, just threw down like 7 of them.
They had 10 in the game, right? Total. Not all map. Yeah.
I mean, Purdue's the better team here, but Purdue's not winning right now. Yeah. So I would be ready for anything. Indiana's a bad shooting team, but so is Michigan State. And, bad shooting teams that get really good looks tend to be better shooting teams than their numbers indicate. So Purdue's got to make sure that they don't give them opportunities enough, like they did Robert Finney a couple of years ago. They just gave him open shots by not being good enough defensively. He gets in a rhythm, and suddenly, of all people, Robert Finney wins that game for them on their home floor. Jaden Ivey getting hurt right before the game didn't help, but they've got to make sure that they respect everybody on the floor for Indiana. Malik Renault is a different player now than he was before, and that's going to change things for them a little bit. But no, I would go into this game if I'm Purdue, and I'm sure they will, expecting the very best Indiana has to throw at them, because Purdue's already seen it.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to think Indiana will be something less than it was before on its own home floor. Now, whether or not they're playing for Mike Woodson, whether or not the crowd is as engaged as it normally would be, I don't know. But it is a Purdue-Indiana game, so I would imagine it would be a pretty difficult environment. And Purdue's got to kind of dig deep here. This team is not used to this. They're not used to losing 3 straight games. They're used to winning these championship stakes games. You remember the game at Illinois last year? I think that had they already. That was
that was a chance to win it. Yeah, that got them the outright title. Right.
But Purdue is used to winning these games. Going to Wisconsin last year when they're number 6 in the country. Purdue's used to winning those games, and right now they've lost 3 in a row, and it's got to at some point bring something out of them. These are guys who played in the Final Four. They played for a national title. If there's something in there that can be brought out at the right time, that time was 3 games ago, or that time was 2 games ago, or that time was 1 game ago, but that time is sure as hell right now. So it's kind of a pride check time for Purdue now, for all that experience to start showing up.
All right. Well, we will be watching closely on Sunday afternoon, 1:30 tip-off in Assembly Hall. Brian, thank you. We appreciate, as always, your expertise, and very well explained about where Purdue basketball is right now. Alan Karpick here with Tom Dienhart. Time to talk some Purdue football, and nobody covers it better than Tom and all the work he does with goldenblack.com. You've had now Zoom interviews, I think, with all the assistant coaches. Is that correct? Just about. And I guess it's hard to put into words, but your overall impression of the guys, and I know it's a little bit tough when you aren't seeing them on the field just yet, but just a chance to kind of intermingle with them a little bit. What has been your takeaways with this group of Barry Odom's staff?
All business, I guess, would be a maybe a good little working headline, if you will. Again, this is all from 10,000 feet at this point.
Yeah. Zoom will do that. Yeah. Go ahead.
That doesn't mean we can't have an opinion, right?
Yeah.
We're never short of opinions. But yeah, I think it's an organized group. I think it's a mature group. It's a group you can tell there's already that connectiveness that everybody in any organization, especially sports, always love to talk about, their connectivity. Mm-hmm. So, and again, you just look at their bloodlines and how often these guys have worked together throughout their careers. So there's a familiarity, Alan. You know what, you want to hire people you know. You want to hire people you've worked with, because for obvious reasons, we all know the reasons why. You can trust them. You know what their work ethic is. You know what they're about. And so then it looks like Odom obviously was very conscious of that when you put this staff together. And then, of course, now, Alan, they're trying to lay that foundation they've been talking about. Trying to let guys know how they want things done. And again, that always ubiquitous word, Alan Karpick, culture. They're trying to establish their culture. Did anybody talk about culture in the 1980s? I always wonder about that.
Yeah.
Did Leon Burton ever talk about culture? But I digress. Maybe that was Leon's problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, those are the types of rudimentary things they're trying to do right now. They're lifting weights. They're doing some workouts by themselves. And then, Alan, before you know it, my friend, next week is the last full week of February, if you can believe that. March will be here, and then March 4th, buddy, they're pumping the air on the pigskin and having some spring football.
Yeah, any indication yet on, I know the schedule's out there, any indication on availability? I know you've written a little bit about that this week.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I was over at Kozich the other day doing that something real quick with Barry Odom, and was talking to a staffer, and there's a chance, Alan, the practice is maybe wide open, at least for the media. They weren't sure about the general public, but So again, I'm hopeful when I heard that. I mean, there's nothing in stone yet, but so there's a chance that I would be allowed. Some people look at it as punishment. Be allowed to watch a 2-hour spring football from start to finish, from stretch to whistle.
Yeah, and that is probably the only way that you can really evaluate what these personalities are, by seeing them in the heat of the battle, these assistant coaches, because you did mention the word culture, and Purdue needs to change that. When you have a 1-11 season, that's by definition. But you sit down with Barry Odom, your impressions there. Again, all business. We've been around him a few times, but doesn't seem to be overwhelmed by what he needs to get done. He seems to be, is your impression that he's taking it one step at a time, or how does it look?
Yeah, I was over there doing that Boilermaker Alliance interview in his office, and yeah, he's a guy out. I always admire people. You're kind of like this, where they always seem unflustered. They never seem rushed. He never seems rushed. If that was me, Alan, sometimes I would look at my SID or my schedules. God, do I really have to do this?
Yeah.
I maybe would try to hurry through something. You know what? You always feel like you got his full attention. You've got Barry Odom. His feet are where they're planted, Alan.
Yeah.
He's going to give you everything he's got at that moment. That's always an admirable trait. And yeah, again, he always speaks in very measured tones. You can tell he's a savvy head coach who's been through media training or knows how to handle media, knows what to say. But I tried to get some other bits of personal information out of him that's non-football related. If you're a member of the Boilermaker Alliance, you can watch that. But and yeah, I'll tell you one thing, Alan, was the portal. We were just kind of discuss the portal real quick. And boy, they brought in 29 portal guys, right? I'm just going to say this. They're not done.
Yeah.
There's going to be quite a few more portal additions, it sounds like, in this April window when we get here in a couple months.
Where are they? And you're good at keeping track of that 105 number. Where are they, or is it hard to tell right now in terms of how many in or how many out, how many spots they might have available?
Yeah, I've got that. I pinned it to the top of the Knucklehead Central message board. I put together a 20. I call it a football roster distribution chart, and I have them according to my account, Alan, and I'm getting my numbers just from the official roster on the website. I've included walk-ons on this roster distribution chart. I have them at 110 players right now, and they've got to be at 105 is the roster limit for FBS football. So there you go. They're not concerned with getting there, obviously, at this point. That number could swell well beyond 110, maybe through the course of the summer. Who knows? But that's where it is. Barry Odom talked about that a little bit. UNLV, they didn't have big numbers to begin with, so he kind of got used to having them work with and play with a pretty small roster, right at about 105. Where he said some schools could have huge rosters up to 120 or 30 guys. So my point being, Alan, this is a road he's traversed before. Very mindful of your numbers. Everybody's going to have injuries. What happens when you get injuries? There's no waiver wire. So we discussed some of those type of topics too. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this roster continues to come together, Alan, and what the finals number look position by position in particular.
Well, in this, you may not know the answer to this question, but just will it be like a taxi squad in the NFL where if you're rostered at 105 and you have some injuries, you can bring some guys in, or is there going to be do you have any idea how that's going to work? I'm
nothing.
Just curious.
There's nothing like that. There's no JV squad, if you will. There's no taxi squad, if you will. There's no practice squad that you see in the NFL. That'd be an ideal, right? To have a little developmental group of 10 guys or something. And establish a set of rules around them. But no, not that I'm aware of, Alan. That's your 105, man. And if you get 10 guys injured, you got to deal with a roster of 95 guys. So it's the way of the world, and you have to be mindful. It's really nothing new, I guess, overall. But especially it's a concern at those positions where you don't have great numbers because you don't have a great need, like a kicker in particular, long snapper, some of those specialty positions. And and sometimes quarterback to a degree as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And he's even talking about needing more offensive linemen to be, which you always need more offensive linemen if you're a Barry Odom or any coach, and that certainly has been an area. So you've taken us through position groupings and the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers. I know on the site on Friday, they're all interesting because they're all different, with the exception maybe of running back that you have an A player with Devin Mockabee that's gonna hold that position down. But which one intrigues you the most, or are they all going to be intriguing because they're all so different at this point?
It's a sea of names, Alan.
Yeah,
and imagine the general fan out there looks at those files and has no clue who any of these guys are, and that's understandable. Boy, the most intriguing. I tell you what, the two I think are a wide receiver and defensive back, but I guess I'm going to go with defensive back. That's the spot that lost the most players to the portal, Alan. I think it was 11 guys.
Right, unbelievable.
That they're basically starting from scratch. They've got some guys who redshirted last year, some freshmen, some redshirt freshmen back. But if you're a veteran with any significance experience, you're gone. So This is totally revamped secondary. How's it going to come together? Going to be fascinating, right? It's going to be very fascinating. So that's the one area I think. And again, I'll go back to receiver too, Alan. 5 players hit the portal. The quote-unquote best veteran back is Denylon Morissette. As far as the top pass catcher goes. So there you go. Jaden Dixon-Veals, another name maybe familiar to people. He's back. Armand Branch, a young kid from Festus, Missouri. He's back. But Alan, they're starting over there. Jamal Edrin's gone. C.J. Smith is gone. Jerron Tibbs is gone. So they're basically, again, the one promising youngster, Shamar Rigby, left too. So
yeah.
Again, they got their pockets turned inside out trying to redo this receiving unit. And they brought in 5 kids too, Alan. None of them have a real fat scrapbook, as I like to say. Maybe the most touted one is the kid from Tennessee, Nathan Lecoq. But I know nobody knows, Alan. So I guess defensive back and wide receiver to me are going to be 2 very intriguing groups.
You always say how you admire guys that aren't flustered. You're not flustered by dealing with all this change. You just deal with it. That's a good attribute to have. You're going to have your hands full. I mean, you already do with trying to keep this straight down throughout the course of the spring. Yeah, Paul Feinbaum wrote. I was going to say, it talked a little bit this week and on our site. It wasn't on our site, but it was an article that, or I think it's what he talked about on a show this week. Just about the general fatigue of fans and the concern that there may be in terms of all this flux. We've talked about this before, but are we? How much of that is a danger if you're not only a Purdue fan, but all this change and all these new players and nobody loyal to any place at this point in time. What do you see? What do you see in your crystal ball, or is this the new normal that we just will eventually deal with?
It's the new normal, Alan, as much as guys like you and I want our fist and yell at the clouds.
Yeah.
It's not going back to how it was. So they always say change or perish. I heard that a long time ago, change or perish. And yeah, it's different. And no, I'm not a fan of it either. I was talking to somebody about how, their experience of the players. Like I think back to Drew Brees came in 97. Those group of guys went to school together for 4 years. This friendship with Benny Sutherland, Matt Mitrione, Tim Stratton, the stuff you go through for 4 or 5 years together, it's gone, Alan.
Yeah.
These guys are playing at 4 schools in 5 years. So, I mean, maybe I'm romanticizing, but gosh, this is an experience. I guess if you don't know, if you never had the experience, you don't know you missed it, right? But that was a cool thing about college, even for us, living in a fraternity, being with the same guys for a few years.
Yeah.
I'm still friends with all those guys, and these guys are kind of carpetbaggers. Some of them are chasing it from school to school. But yeah, I could see where maybe fans get a little fatigued with it. But Alan, the one thing, you know what? If your school wins, you're not fatigued, right? So that's the bottom line. That's the same as it's been since they first started competing. The cavemen started competing, right? Everybody loves a winner, and if you win, fans aren't going to care how you put your roster together.
All right, well said. And I think there is a lot to that. We'll just have to get used to it. We're getting used to it, and there will be storylines throughout the course of spring ball. Tom will be covering that extensively starting March the 4th, correct? Spring game or whatever it's going to be is April 12th?
April 12th, and Pro Day is going to be on March 5th.
Right.
Put something on the site. I've talked to Gus Hartwig last week. Big Gus is in Fort Myers, Florida. He's not down there on the beach suntanning,
no,
frisbee and surfboarding. He's working out at X3. He'll be up here at Pro Day. It ought to be a pretty good turnout for Pro Day on the 5th, and I'm going to have more on that as we get closer as well. And again, the combine starts up here too. Alan Marcus Bowe is going to be working out in Indianapolis. The offensive lineman will work out late in the week, and Marcus will be in West Lafayette to go through Pro Day as well.
All right, we'll look forward to that coverage as we always do. All right, Tom, thanks so much for your time and expertise. Stay tuned. We'll have Mike DeCourcy, a guy that Tom Dienhart knows well. We'll talk a little bracketology, Purdue basketball, trying to figure out where the Boilermakers are going to land here, not only the NCAA tournament, maybe on Sunday too when they play Indiana. Going to be an interesting thing to watch. Segment 3, joined by Hall of Famer. I don't get to be in the presence of Hall of Famers all that often. Mike DeCourcy joins us. One of my favorite reads, listens in the world of college basketball because you provide such a balanced, sensical, mature approach. Maybe it's because you're at a mature age. I don't know, Mike.
Thanks.
You look at this, and obviously there's a lot of gnashing of teeth around Purdue right now because the Boilermakers have lost 3 in a row. But we're seeing crazy stuff. I mean, in the Big Ten, Northwestern goes to Ohio State and wins by 23 without a couple of its best players. Give us your perspective, not only where Purdue is, but how harried this Big Ten 18-team Big Ten league is.
Well, I think one of the things that I talked about when the leagues expanded to the degree that they have was that, as is the case in the NFL or the NHL or NBA, people were going to have to get used to swings. In some cases, it could be a night like Ohio State had against Northwestern, but it could be full seasons, as might be the case at North Carolina, for instance.
Yeah.
Wherein teams are just not as overwhelming, dominant, excellent as they have been often in different iterations of college athletics. This is different now. Very good teams, very good programs are going to have very bad years, and very good teams are going to have very bad nights. Because you look at UCLA playing at home, chance to go 500 wins for Mick Cronin, coming off a string, I think, of 8 of 9 victories, including that terrific road win Friday night against Indiana. Yeah. Minnesota comes in. You think, okay, well, this is easy. Minnesota, okay, they won at SC, but whatever. This is gonna be easy. And then for a while it was, and that's even worse sometimes because it convinces you that you can relax, and then all of a sudden it happens. And that's college athletics now at the highest level. You relax, you pay, and UCLA did. I don't think that's what's going on with Purdue. I think Purdue has specific flaws that Matt has acknowledged. That absence of a rim protector, would Daniel Jacobson have been that player if he'd been healthy for the full year? Maybe. But without him, that player doesn't exist in a Purdue uniform. And so you're having to get by with basically a 6'8" center, who offensively is phenomenal, but who defensively is also not only 6'8", but he's relatively ground bound. So he's not going to get up and block a lot of shots. And that's an area that the Boilers have trouble in. And teams that they're playing now as the schedule toughens know to try to take advantage of that. And for the last 3 games have been successful.
Yeah, and when you look at the coaches Purdue's faced, they do get paid to figure stuff out, and that's the. All right, you're one of the teams in specifically for Purdue. I mean, you do start at a good place with very seasoned guards and Smith and Lawyer. It's going to be tough, though, on Sunday against Indiana because you don't know what you're going to see out of the Hoosiers. They've lost, 6 of 7, but they had Purdue in the last 2 minutes in Mackey Arena. They were ahead. So how do you view that game on Sunday? And it's going to be a challenge for the Boilermakers, one would think.
Yeah, and I think I think it helps from a Purdue standpoint. I think it helps that it's a rivalry game. Yeah. Because I suppose when you're in a 3-game losing streak, you're not going to have that relaxed idea, and you're on the road. But I think it helps them to know that they need to be excellent in order to succeed on the road in that environment, where even if Indiana fans are frustrated with this season, they're going to want to try to make that season better. At least I'm not going to say it's going to make the season, but it'll make it better if they can take down Purdue, their arch rival. So it's a challenge for absolutely for the Boilers. They have to do a good job of keeping Miles Rice and Trey Galloway out of the lane. That's not been a strength for the Boilers over that 3-game losing streak. They have not protected the perimeter well. The way you protect your absence of rim protection, the way you cope with that is to keep players out of the lane. And that's not something that's gone well recently. For the Boilers, they have to do a better job of keeping guys on the perimeter. And I think Rice is the biggest threat there because he's the quickest, the most dynamic guard that Indiana is deploying. And then Galloway is just he is an underrated athlete. He can, especially straight line. He knows how to get. He's not super elusive. He's not Chris Paul. He doesn't go side to side and then get by you. But he understands how to get. He's very fast, straight, and so he understands how to get that one step on you, and then he's gone. And so that's something that Purdue has to be aware of as well. And if they can do that, I think they can do a good job defensively against the Hoosiers. But that's the primary concern at that end of the floor. And then offensively, I think that one of the things that has led to a 3-game losing streak is not just that they aren't defending at the level necessary, but in order to counter the struggle on defense, they need to shoot the basketball better. Yeah. They've got guys who can shoot who aren't making shots at the level that is necessary to overcome that defensive concern, the short-term defensive concern and the long-term defensive concern. You got to shoot the ball better. The most remarkable thing about this season to me, Alan, is that I thought that Miles Colvin and Camden Heide were going to make major steps forward. Yeah. Maybe not to supplant the players that were in place, but to really make Purdue just so deep and rich on the perimeter. And the fact that they are where they are and have won the games that they've won without that happening. Each has had very good games. You don't beat Ole Miss without Miles, for instance. But although each has had very good games, it's not been their game to game. And I'm sure that's a frustration inside the program because we know that they have it in them because, like I said, like you don't go out and score 20 against one of the better defensive teams, half-court defensive teams in the country in Ole Miss if you can't play. So why isn't it there on a nightly basis?
Yeah, it is a topic that's discussed all the time in West Lafayette, certainly those two. All right, you like in the Big Ten, in your top 12 ranking, you had 2 teams, Michigan and Wisconsin. Who do you like the best? I mean, Michigan's going to be in very good shape to win the Big Ten, at least a share of the Big Ten championship. But Wisconsin was one of the most impressive teams I've seen when they came to Mackey Arena. And that game really wasn't all that close in the second half. Talk about those 2 teams in the landscape of the conference moving ahead.
They're both extraordinary because they have such different approaches than most teams out there. Yeah. Michigan, because of Danny Wolf and what he's able to do at 7 feet, he's basically a 7-foot guard. Although that's not to say he doesn't do his job defensively or on the boards, but he's got guard skills. He's got guard vision. He can play in so many different ways off 2 feet, off 1 foot. He's got the ability to make plays. That covers at Michigan for the fact that Trey Donaldson is a terrific player and a terrific player who nominally is their point guard. And now that they're not turning the basketball over so regularly, and Trey is a big part of that, they are really a much more competent offensive team now. You can't count on them to give you the basketball. So now it's going and it's getting into the hands of Danny Wolf to create. It's really hard to cope with. Wisconsin, because they have basically two 7-footers, Nolan Winter and Stephen Crow, who both are able to play on the perimeter. Their ball skills, their mobility, the fact that they can also, especially Crow, can go inside and play singled up and score. Really a tough thing to deal with. And then you've got guys like Tonje and Blackwell who they allow more creative freedom than they've allowed most perimeter players at Wisconsin. Over the past 8 or 9 years, they haven't had a lot of those guys. Johnny Davis, for the better part of his senior season, or his last season, I guess I should say, I think he was a junior, but his last season at Wisconsin was that kind of player. But then he got hurt. He was limited, and that team lost steam. But Tonje is a very creative wing. Blackwell, again, really can get his own shot. Not the most, again, not Jason Kidd in terms of creating, but can get his own shot and then run the system to get other shots. So it's a very difficult team to play against. I love both of those teams going into March because they have so many different ways to play and succeed. We saw Michigan bring out zone defense some. I like that because it's a change up that coaches have a hard time preparing for sometimes because they don't see it a ton in the course of a regular season. So I like both of them going into March. I think they each have has a terrific chance to do well in the NCAA tournament.
The narrative in the first half of the Big Ten season, Braden Smith was, and maybe still is, maybe the best point guard in the country. Tonje certainly does, and other guys have come forward. Take it, there's a lot on his shoulders, and he's playing 40 minutes a game, or only 39 minutes and 30 seconds against Michigan State. But my point is, he's a kid that is hyper competitive. It's February. It's a grueling schedule. What do you see from him? And he's been terrific for 3 years, but it is a tough challenge, one would think.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to do that, but he's conditioned to do that now. Yeah. So I don't think that it becomes too much of a problem. It might be a problem if they had a 4-game run or a 3-game run, depending on where they land in the bracket in Indianapolis at the Big Ten tournament. I don't know that necessarily would be great for him to do that 3 days in a row and then go into the NCAA tournament and get a Thursday game, for instance. I mean, that kind of scenario would worry me a little bit about his load management, as they say in the NBA now.
Yeah.
But I think he's fine relative to that. I don't see a significant problem for him in playing the minutes load he does. If they were able to get a game where they were winning comfortably and you didn't have to have him out there for 40, that's good. That certainly take advantage of that. But remember, these guys work every day in practice, and then they work after practice because they want to be great. So playing 40 minutes on a given night, I think that's more a mental challenge, especially when you're on a losing streak, than it is a physical one for someone as well-conditioned as he is.
Yeah, I think you've seen a little bit of the signs of that little bit of a poise issue, and again, this is as tough a competitor as you're going to find in Braden Smith, and really the whole group at Purdue is kind of built that way. How much do you build if you're Purdue trying to make this, right the ship and make a statement in March in terms of that Final Four experience? I mean, you've got guys that have been there, Colvin and Heidi included. Is that something that you've seen drawn out of teams as they get into March when you've gone through a little bit of a swoon in February?
I don't want to be a downer here, but it certainly can help.
Yeah.
But it's not a guarantee of anything. I mean, I think of 1993. Duke had been in 2 consecutive championships, won 2 in a row. They still had Grant Hill and Bobby Hurley. And I think they were a 3 seed or a 2 seed. And they lost to Jason Kidd and Cal. It not helped that Jason Kidd was on the other side, and maybe that muted the fact that you had Bobby Hurley, but it's still it didn't make a difference for that team. That's the first one that popped into my mind that clearly had that Final Four experience. Hey, look at UConn right now, and maybe it'll end up mattering, but right now it's not scoring any points for them to have multiple players who played in the championship game 2 years in a row and won it. I think for them, for the Boilers, it can help you through a moment. But what's going to help you most is making sure that your offense is at its best and the defense is the best you can make it. And I think that's what will matter most.
Yeah, well said. All right, last question. Bracketology, that kind of keeps you, I don't know how you keep it all straight, but Purdue, you had Purdue on the 3 line prior to, I believe this week, prior to the loss to Michigan State. Where do you see Purdue, and what are some of the factors? They, in a perfect world, Purdue would love to have an opportunity to play in Indianapolis in the regionals. That is starting to look less likely, but how do you put it all together, and where do you see not only Purdue but the number of Big Ten teams in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I think the good news for Purdue is that below the 1 line, and maybe the first or second spot of the 2 line, it's kind of like a traffic jam. Yeah. There's not a huge separation between the low 2 and the 5 line, which means, they could fall to a 5 if they continue to struggle in what remains. But there's also the opportunity to climb because they're playing significant opponents, because they're playing in one of the 2 best leagues. I'm not going to pretend that the Big Ten is having the season that the SEC is, or that the Big Ten is having a season at the level of, say, 2020 or 2021. But it's still a great season. The Big Ten is having a phenomenal year with the additions, some of the additions like UCLA playing really well, like Oregon playing really well. So being near the front of that conference means a lot. But once you look at teams like and Iowa State, and then you look down to the 5 line with teams like Maryland and Marquette and Kentucky and Mississippi State, you're in that mix, and it's up to Purdue to try to be to the front of that mix and not to the back of it. Not the worst case scenario to be a 5. Certainly, you wouldn't want to be a 5 in Auburn's region. You'd much rather be a 5 in Florida's region, but that's out of your control. What is in your control is winning as many games as possible against the terrific opponents you play down the stretch, and that will put them in the best possible position. Whether that means Indy or not, there's no way to say. On my Tuesday bracket, I had St. John's going to Providence and Newark. They were the first number 4 seed. So they went to Providence, Newark, first choice both places. They won earlier in the week. Some teams lost. Now they're the last 3. If you win it, you're headed to San Francisco. There's just no way to say for sure where geographically you'll end up unless you are Alabama, Auburn, Duke, or maybe Florida. Those are the teams that kind of have a handle on where they're going to go.
You and I are maybe too old to remember the analytical portion of the SAT, but I think you would have done very, very well because that you've got to really put it all together when you put that bracketology together, and it's always an interesting read. We love your work on the Big Ten Network as well. It's always insightful. You and I could talk I could talk to you, I should say, for about 3 hours on this subject. But thanks so much for your time, Mike. Safe travels. Enjoy. The best time of the year for college basketball is upcoming, and maybe it'll be a better time for Purdue. Who knows? But we appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching and listening to Saturday Simulcast, February 22nd edition. Couple programming notes. One, we will have a Monday Night Memories of the 40-year anniversary of the Bob Knight chair toss against Purdue back in Assembly Hall. Of course, that may feed on right after the Purdue's game tomorrow, Sunday, in Assembly Hall as Purdue takes on the Hoosiers. Want to also remind folks that if you get our feed through Apple Podcast or Spotify, I think our feed is now working. So, and up to date with our new Simulcast podcast platform. So all should be well, and you should have access to all of our Saturday Simulcast, Brian Neubert's drive home. Who would want to miss that? And of course, our Gold and Black radio broadcasts that take place on Tuesday. Want to thank too the Union Club Hotel. And this spring, remember that Boiler House Prime opens in West Lafayette, nestled in the Burke Boilermaker Golf Complex. Experience the dining room's refined club-inspired ambiance with a 2-story wine wall and grand 30-seat bar. Then savor an exclusive raw bar and signature cuts of beef. You can visit Boiler House Prime, I should say, .com to check more about that clubhouse coming along. Going to be quite the addition to the Purdue campus off of Cherry Lane. So have a great rest of your weekend. And we appreciate all of you for watching and listening. A reminder, too, you can subscribe to goldenblack.com. We have specials going on for new subscribers right now. We'd love to have you as a member of our goldenblack.com family. So have a great rest of your weekend, all. And thanks so much.